Hello everyone and welcome to the craziest game so far. This is round 4 of the Blitz section, Fabiano Caruana versus Saric, and the game lasted well over 100 moves, but we're not gonna analyze every little possibility in this one as this is Blitz. We're gonna go through the game and I'm only gonna cover what's really important, so maybe 3 or 4 sidelines as I usually do covering Blitz games. But yeah, I mean it's a really crazy game. You guys will enjoy it. Let's check it out. Fabi, leader of the tournament, opens with pawn to d4. Even strikes with knight to f6, pawn to c4, g6, knight to c3, and bishop to g7. We have the King's Indian defense here. Pawn to e4, d6, and knight to f3. Even castles and bishop to e2. So the so-called orthodox variation against the King's Indian, all been seen before, e5, d5, knight b to d7, and bishop to g5. Again, all been played before, h6, bishop to h4, g5, bishop to g3, and knight to h5. The usual stuff. You want to remaneuver the knight over to f4, where white will have to deal with the knight just being there. You're never going to capture and open up black's dark square bishop. So knight to d2. And now knight to f4. We have castles. Like I said, you never want to do this. I mean, just by looking at this, you know, it's just wrong. So after knight f4, castles, and now knight to f6. We have rook to e1, and there are some games that reach this position. For example, knight captures on e2 is a known move, but we have pawn to a5 by e1, and it is now as of move 13 that we have a completely new game. So okay, knight to f1 by Fabi. We have knight captures on e2 check, queen captures, and pawn to h5, continuing to push those kingside pawns as one usually does in a King's Indian defense. Pawn to f3, freeing up the f2 square for the bishop, so h4, bishop to f2, and now knight to h5. The other knight will also now come to f4 or maybe even g3. We have pawn to h3 and now knight to f4. We have queen to d2, getting the queen off of the nasty e2 square, and pawn to f5. Again, in the spirit of the King's Indian defense, we have e captures on f5, bishop captures on f5, and knight to e3, going after the light square bishop, so bishop to g6 and knight to g4 by Fabi. Pawn to b6, we have knight to e4, and now pawn to a4. Even continues pushing pawns on the queen side, as there's not all that much to do on the king side. The center is closed, the bishop's for the moment not doing all that much, and it's hard to figure out what to do with the queen and the rook. So it does make sense to push those pawns. If possible, at some point you want to play b5, move the queen, get the rook to b8, and try to do some damage along the queen side. So rook 8 to c1 by Fabi, and bishop to f5. Rook to c3, we have queen to e7, now preparing rook to b8, and bishop to e3. Bishop captures on e4, even gives up one of his bishops. F captures on e4, and queen to d7. You can see that the players are playing quickly, but even already down to 30 seconds on the clock, Fabi almost 2 minutes. We have bishop to f2, and rook to f7. We have rook to a3, trying to organize an attack against the a4 pawn, but also preparing rook to a1 and pawn to b4. If you strike with b4, let's say captures en passant and captures, you already have rooks doubled on the a file. Rook f to back to f8, even decides not to double up on the f file as he figures out what Fabi is doing. Rook to a1, and now rook f to b8, and Fabi goes back, rook to c1. It's interesting he does not go for pawn to b4, but yeah, okay, he's probably gonna try a few other ideas before he does it. I mean, there's no need to rush this. It's not like Ivan has a breakthrough of his own. Well, he does have b5, but we'll see if he does it. Rook back to c1, and queen to e8 by Ivan. We have knight to e3, and queen to g6. Now putting pressure on that e4 pawn, so knight to f5. And this is now a monster knight here. The immediate threat is knight e7 check, picking up the queen here. So bishop to f6, covering the e7 square, and queen back to d1. We have king to h7, queen to g4, and now rook to g8. So Fabi, Ivan is now ready to trade off queens, but also so is Fabi. King to h2 and queen to h5, offering a queen trade. Fabi goes for it, queen captures, knight captures, and now knight back to e3. We have knight back to f4 and knight to g4, going after the bishop and the fork. Bishop to e7 and bishop to e3. We have rook g back to b8, even again continuing his plan of advancing the pawn to b5, as that's pretty much his only way of activating his pieces. Rook to c2 by Fabi and king to g6. We have king to g1 and bishop to d8. King to f2 and bishop to e7. We have king to e1, rook to f8, and rook back to f2. We have rook back to rook f back to b8, and rook to c3. We have bishop to d8 and bishop back to d2, and finally Ivan decides to strike with pawn to b5. We have pawn to c5. Fabi wants to open up the c file, not the b file. Pawn to b4 attacking the rook, rook c to f3 doubling up, and pawn to b3 by Ivan. Fabi blocks the position, pawn to a3, and now rook to b5, putting pressure on the c5 pawn. So bishop to b4, and Ivan just went bishop to e7. Here, very interesting would be rook captures on b4. I guess as both of them are now pretty much playing exclusively on increment, even below the 10-second mark. Capturing the bishop on b4 doesn't come as a natural, but it would give Fabi great problems. Maybe it's possible to save it, but after rook to b8 it's very unclear how white should proceed. For example, king d2, you're going to capture on b4, and you make one move, let's say rook a3, rook e3, a3, and now if b captures on a3, of course b2, and that's a game. So capturing the bishop was definitely the way to go for Ivan. But he went bishop to e7. Now c captures on d6, bishop captures, and bishop back to c3. Fabi probably realized that the bishop had no business being on b4. Plus now it was attacked twice, and he's now putting pressure on that e5 pawn. So rook to e8, Ivan defends it, and king to d1. We have rook to c5 and rook to d2. We have rook to c4 and rook to e3. Rook to e7, rook to e1, and now rook captures on c3. Finally, Ivan goes for it. We have b captures and bishop captures on a3, now creating two connected pass pawns on the queen side. And objectively, Ivan's position is much, much better. It's not close to winning like it was in that position, but with 7 seconds both on the clock, this is definitely anyone's game, but chances for surviving this as white are not great. So knight to e3, we have bishop back to d6, Ivan now ready to push his pawns. King to c1, a3. We have king to b1 and rook to e8. The rook also wants to join in the party. Knight to f5, going after the bishop here, and rook to b8. We have rook to e3, pawn to b2, and now rook to d1. And here, the key move for Ivan to win this game is to play bishop to c5. Not to go after the rook, that's pretty much irrelevant, but to prevent knight captures on d6. And the bishop here would nicely control the knight, and everything would be okay. Ivan would just be winning. The two connected pass pawns are unstoppable. However, he played knight captures on g2 first, going after the rook, rook to f3, knight back to f4, and now Fabi played pawn to c4. Again, Ivan has a chance to play bishop to c5, but he doesn't see it. He plays king to f6, and now Fabi just plays knight captures on d6. And what is the bishop doing? The bishop is guarding the pawn on a3. So knight captures on d6, c captures, and rook captures on a3. When Fabi captured this, Ivan was like, oh, come on, not this. But he does have more pawns. He plays g4. Now he creates a passed pawn on the king side. H captures h3, rook to a2. Fabi now ready to eliminate the passed b pawn, and rook to c8. Ivan now goes after the c4 pawn. We have rook to a6, now going after the d6 pawn. Fabi captures on c4. Ivan captures on c4. Fabi captures on d6 with check. King to g5, and now king captures on b2, and rook captures on e4. We have rook to d8, and king captures on g4. So Fabi still up the exchange, but Ivan is up a pawn, and it's a passed h pawn. We have pawn to d6, now comes pawn to h2, pawn to d7, and knight to e6. Ivan will, of course, have to give up his knight for this pawn, but the h2 pass pawn is pretty incredible. Rook to e8, and now rook to d4. And this is a pretty tricky move, but after rook to d4, well, the position was already winning for Fabi, but after rook to d4, it's winning on the spot, and you just have to play rook captures on d4. The point being that after rook captures, you cannot capture with the knight, you can't even capture with the pawn, but if you capture with the knight, then rook h8 stops the promotion of this pawn, and you are threatening to promote the d pawn. And if knight e6 stopping this promotion, then you capture on h2. And now after, let's say, pawn to e4, you just go rook to h8, and after e3, you just play rook to e8, and that's it. You resign this. King f5, you just play rook captures on e6, king captures, you bring a queen into the game, and of course e2, you just check, pick up the pawn, and then checkmate the black king. But a few seconds on the clock, of course, easier said than done. Rook to h1 was played by Fabi, and now the position is again equal. Rook captures on d7, rook captures on e6. Yes, I said equal, even though Fabi is up a full rook, but you have to play the precise move. And it's definitely one that could happen to you, so it's good to know. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the only move that saves the game for Ivan while I give you a couple of seconds. The move, of course, is rook to h7. It's always rook to h7. I don't mean it's always rook to h7, but it's, you know, the oldest principle in the book. Put the rook behind the passed pawn. It works here, it works everywhere else. Of course, it wasn't played, but to give you an idea of why it works, let's say we play rook captures on e5, you have to get rid of the pawn, king f3, not king g3. If king g3, then you allow the rook to come to e2. You have to prevent this, king f3, and now, okay, doesn't matter what you play, king g2 is coming, and that's pretty much it. Even if you play rook to e1, king to g2, there's no way to do anything about this. The pawn is just too strong. Let's say you play king c3, already you start checking. Let's say the king goes up the board, you go here, the king attacks the rook, you go here. Let's say rook to h3, the king once again goes after the rook. Now you go rook a3, and well, there's no way to move. You can't move this rook, this rook would fall, and even if you try to somehow get them out of there, then rook h3. Again, you're hoping h1 queen, and everything just gets traded off, and it's a draw. So that's the point. But Ivan played rook to d2 with check, and now Fabi is completely winning. King to c3 attacks the rook, rook to f2. King to d3, king to h3, and rook to h6 with check. King g3, king e3, and rook to f3 with check. King e4, rook f2. King captures on e5 and rook to e2 with check. King to d4, rook to a2, and rook to g6 with check. Finally, getting rid of the king off of the defense of the h2 pawn. King f3, rook g8, and rook to a4 with check. King to c3, and now Fabi slipped again, because if Ivan finds a rook to h4, again putting the rook behind the passed pawn, it's a draw. But he doesn't. He still goes down the board. Rook to a2, and now Fabi is again winning. We have rook to f1 with check, king e2, and rook g to f8, and there's no more way for the king to reach the passed pawn. There's no way to promote the pawn. There's no way to do anything here. Rook to a3 check. King b2, rook h3 check, rook h1, and now king to e3. We have king to c2, king to e2, and now rook to f7. We have rook to h4, and now king to c3. We have king to e3, and we reach the true meaning of the title of this video. Here, Fabi has mate in 1, but he's not thinking about mate in 1. He knows what he has to do, and he doesn't want to spend more than 2 seconds on each move, because he's playing an increment. Of course, rook to e1 here is checkmate. Everyone can see that, as the rook cuts off the king here, the king cuts off the king here. And if you control the e-file with this rook, then of course it is checkmate. But he misses it. He goes rook to f8, even goes rook to h6, and again Fabi has rook to e1 checkmate, but he plays king to c4. We have rook to h5, and now rook to f7, rook to h4 check, king to f5, we have rook h5 check, king e6, rook h4, king to e5, rook to h5 check, rook f5, rook to h8, and king to f6, and here king to e4, and he was in this position on move 104 that Ivan Saric lost on time. And that is the story of this game. But even though he lost on time, it's completely winning for Fabi. For example, king to g7, you try to trade off rooks, and if the rook moves, you just go after the h-pawn. Doesn't matter what you play. A couple of checks, you hide your king behind your opponent's king, and okay, it looks like some sort of a checkmate threat, but it really isn't. The king can always go to the h-file. You will capture the h-pawn, and that's it. Now you checkmate the black king. Easy win. If you don't know how to win this, I can also make a tutorial on how to beat one rook with 2 rooks, as it's not, maybe it's not self-explanatory. But yeah, really, really wild stuff here, and it really shows you how the mind of a truly exceptional grandmaster works. Maybe not just his, maybe just every chess player's. He knows what he has to do. He knows that he has to win that pawn, and then it's an easy victory for him. And he knows that he cannot invest more than 2 seconds per move because he's playing an increment, and he just that's the objective. He knows it's winning, and he knows there's nothing Ivan can do for it not to be winning, and he's not even looking at anything else. He's not, even if Ivan dropped a full rook, Fabi probably wouldn't capture it. And even if he misses a mate in one, Fabi's not looking for checkmate here. So yeah, very, very interesting insight into the mind of one of the greatest players in the world. But like I said, I imagine it would be similar with pretty much everyone else. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember, if you're very low on time, don't look for checkmates. Just win the game. Otherwise, you're going to lose many, many games, as Fabi has shown us here. I would like to thank Michael Hoff, Lawrence Brazier, Edward Bazo, Kevin O'Grady, and James Eugene Cashman for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this splendid event until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.